Hey, how's it going? Seem like we have anybody in chat currently, but that's alright. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. As you can see, I already have a few of these guys painted up and mostly base coated, though there's a few details that I'm still in need of tightening up or fixing or even still filling in, like the stocks of the guns, which is actually where we're gonna start. Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and pick up my oak brown from Army Painter. I'm sorry if the paint is a little loud. Alright, where did my brush go? I keep my Winsor & Newton separate from the rest of my brushes because, good lord, it's expensive. So, I'm just going to take some of the Army Painter Oak Brown and start carefully filling in. Let's go ahead and adjust this a little bit. And start filling it in. I like about the Army Painter Oak Brown is that it's fairly thin, and it's almost like a contrast paint in the, let's go ahead and just turn it on to autofocus, see if that helps us out. Nope. There we go. It's as I was saying, it's almost like a contrast paint in its consistency and coverage, which is kind of weird. Army painters are typically known for being a bit thicker. I'm not usually a fan of Army Painter paints, but that's because they don't really use a water-based... Well, actually, that might be incorrect. Their consistency is inconsistent. So, we're just going to be quickly filling in some details so I can get a wash on these guys, and I'm planning on doing a snowy base for these guys just because it seems a little different. Seems like it might benefit us. So yeah, we're just gonna fill in the wood furniture of this weapon. Make sure to get behind. And I'm probably going to come back with brass and fill in all these butt plates on the back that I don't know if you can see. Mainly because I want to have it feel a bit more like a World War I Springfield. World War One? That might be World War II. The Springfield or Infield. Because these are Valor Corps models from Maker's Cult. I will not be posting a link down below because reasons. But yeah, if you look up the Valor Corps by Maker's Cult, you'll find these models. They are 3D printed on my Creality LD2-0s. My Creality resin printer, I think it's LD-002H is the model number, but honestly, if you're going to pick one up, it's probably worth it to pick up a Mars 2 or an Anycubic Mono. Though I actually do like my Creality resin printer. Don't have too many complaints about it. Gets the job done with an indiscernible quality difference from the Elegoo or the Anycubic. as far as I can tell. Yeah. The way I do batch painting is I pick up a single color, and then I'll just begin painting all the things of that same color on all my models before I switch colors and do the same thing over again. Yeah. I'm not sure why my camera is so grainy right now. It shouldn't be, based off of my lighting and the fact that it's a Canon M50, but here we are. It's a little grainy. Still learning the machine, and that will take some time. But progress. When you're batch painting, it's very easy to forget that you have to dampen your brush back up in order to get a consistent paint flow and to make sure that you don't damage your bristles. This is a Winsor Newton number 7 size 2, or series 7 size 2. And so it's fairly expensive as paintbrushes go. So I want to make sure that I'm giving this thing plenty of hydration, not letting any paint dry on it, just so I can keep using it for a long time. All right, say that guy's pretty good. That guy's already done. And then you'll run into models like this guy who looks a lot like a Luger, if I'm being honest. But this is a metal frame, and there's not actually any wood to be painted on this guy. So we're going to set him aside and keep on trucking. If we get anybody in chat, welcome. I'm Kieran, by the way. I always forget to introduce myself. And I am the man behind the curtain of Tales from the Basement, which is a fairly new miniature painting and Dungeons and Dragons storytelling in general channel. My hope is to grow it into a place that new hobbyists can come to kind of figure things out or find story beats or even learn how to paint models, which I am working on a few different videos, but I'm also still learning my equipment, and that could be preventing me from posting videos yet, because as you can see from the video quality, it's a little grainy, and I'm not entirely sure why. But this guy is way tucked back there. Yeah, I'm gonna rehydrate my brush like I was just talking about. Get some paint back on it. Keep on moving. I know a lot of people watch these things after I post them. It turns out that Friday nights might not be, or Friday nights Pacific Standard Time may not be the best time to stream, because it seems like a lot of people are in their own D&D games at the time, or out, well, I don't know how much nowadays, but might be out partying. Because people that party definitely play Dungeons and Dragons. But, yep. It can be a little tedious painting the same details over and over with the same paint, but also gives you a appreciation for the model, and you really get to know the model you're working with, which, when it comes down to it, I'm going to keep myself in frame, can really help out the entire paint job of your unit, because you really get to know where everything is, and by the time you get to your more important models like your sergeant or anything like that, you really know where everything is supposed to be. And when you know where everything's supposed to be, you end up with a better model. You can put more attention into the details that matter. I'm actually a pretty big fan of batch painting for that reason. You really get to know, and I say this a lot, you get to know your models, which I think for new painters, I suggest like picking up like a box of goblins or something, picking up a bunch of the same type of creature or even the same models when you start out, because you're going to get better by the end. Even if you start out with your first goblin, which I actually haven't had my first painted model here. It's this little guy. This is my first ever painted model. And as you can see, I've come a long way. Better representation might even be to grab a group of goblins that I recently finished. How about we grab the spearman? My most recent goblin next to the first mini I ever painted, which happened to be a goblin. We're gonna... right there. Pretty big difference. You can even see in my eyes how it, like, they just really came together. And I batch painted both of these. You can, one day I might get out my last goblin from when I painted. The last goblin I painted in the first batch of minis I ever painted. So that I can post a picture about that and really show how big of a difference starting out on a particular model and doing a batch paint can help, and how you really get to know what you're working with. And that's if I can keep my promise to actually post the photo on time this time. You can find where I post the pictures and such at my Instagram, which is TalesFT basement _ YT. Excuse me. It's right there at the bottom right of your screen. You'll see my Instagram handle, my Twitter handle, and maybe hit that subscribe button. So I just realized that I don't even know what my own Instagram handle is. Found out recently that Tales from the Basement was actually used in a rap album from the 80s. So whenever I use the hashtag on my post, tagging myself basically because I'm a shill, I've got a lot of rappers looking at my stuff. And it's a little strange, not gonna lie. Surprisingly amount of rappers that are also into Dungeons & Dragons, it turns out. Or tabletop in general, which I was slightly surprised by, but I guess I really shouldn't be. We both spend a lot of time in the basement playing pretend and listening to music. Alright, just gonna keep on painting in all this wood furniture. Currently painting the las gun, and I'm not really sure how much of this is wood furniture because it is a laser weapon. It seems kind of like a fire hazard, in my opinion, but, you know, this is 40K. Are fire hazards really an issue, or is it the Xenos? But who knows? I think I'm going to keep it a little bit less wood furniture for myself because it just makes sense to me. And it's not to say that even historically, flamethrowers and such in our world didn't have wood furniture. They actually did. But there's a whole host of problems that actually come from using flamethrowers that make you, the operator, extremely vulnerable. Nobody wanted to be friends with the guy with the flamethrower. Alright. Sure, we're getting all the little crevices, so it actually feels right when we look at it. We don't want any metallics coming through where there aren't any. Here we are. That's the flamethrower. It does seem to have a wood stock. So we're going to go ahead and paint that in. Now, you might notice that there are certain parts that I'm not really caring if paint gets onto it. And that's mainly because at certain parts, I haven't actually painted them yet. And so I know I'm going to come back and fix some of my mistakes. So if I have to make a choice between smearing paint over an area that is already painted and one that I haven't painted yet, obviously I'm going to put it on the area that I haven't painted yet, because I can just paint over it when I get to that point. I've noticed that in a lot of beginner painters, I really need to stop licking my brush. They tend to focus all their effort in making sure the paint only goes where they want it. And that's great. And that's an important skill, especially when you get into some of the finer detail work, and especially when you're going into like painting eyes and that sort of thing. But you don't have to be so careful around the things that you know you're going to be painting later. The brush control will come with time. You don't need it right away, and that's usually why your first paint jobs take so long, is that you're caring so much about every single spot on the mini. Again, not a bad thing, and it definitely teaches you brush control faster, but if you're doing a batch paint like goblins for the first time, by the time you start getting to those little details that you actually have to be careful, you're already gonna have pretty good brush control just simply from painting 10 of the exact same model. And it goes back to me talking about getting to know the model is also learning what areas you don't have to worry so much about. All right. And even now, when I'm using this paint that has rather abysmal coverage, I'm not going to lie, has rather abysmal coverage, I'm going to be throwing a wash over this, and it's going to like smooth out the inconsistencies in the paint. And because it is a wood, I'm okay with inconsistent textures because it helps sell the fact that this has a wood grain. Even if there's no linear lines or they follow a specific pattern, having that inconsistent, good lord, coverage really helps sell that this is a textured object. You'll even see me later on, before I do the wash, I'm going to be taking one of my dry brushes and stippling on a lighter tan onto the wood to give it a speckled look. Because I also remember that this is like really high tech. It might be like a composite, like MDF, masonite, something like that. So, yeah. That's why I'm a big... There's a lot of mini painters that talk about like, oh, if you use a wash, you're a noob, blah, blah, blah. Then they use streak and grime like a madman. I haven't used streak and grime. I prefer a cleaner paint job. And usually with streak and grime, which is a product that makes things look like grimy, and whether it looks like a fantastic weathering product. I typically prefer a cleaner paint job. I mostly paint when I'm doing commission work, like Dungeons and Dragons player models, and just a wash works far better for me. And because I am doing a snow themed base for these guys. I'm also going for a little bit of it cleaner because they're mostly just going to get like melted snow and such on them. So they're not going to be like really that dirty. But to go back to my original point, because I went off on a tangent, people who say that like using a wash is for noobs, kind of, but it also allows me to get a Killteam like this shaded and to a much nicer looking tabletop quality than people who don't use washes, in a much faster amount of time, to the point where I probably only have 4 or 5 hours into painting all, I think it's between 14 and 16 of these veteran guardsmen. So this batch painting technique and planning on doing a wash can get me almost 20 models painted in about 10 hours. And that's pretty damn good. And I think there needs to be a little bit more credit towards washes, though I know in general in the D&D or tabletop, Warhammer, wargaming communities, that washes are a beloved thing. But in the YouTube scene, it almost seems like it's getting more and more like you're a pleb for using washes, or it's this frowned upon thing, and I don't understand. Because when you're getting into the hobby, you're not going to know like what colors look good to be used as like shades. You're not going to know that when you want to create a good shadow on a red, you use like a purple or like dark blue, depending on the warmth you want to end with the model. And by warmth, I mean the overall feel of the miniature. Like for instance, these guys, they're mostly warm colors, but you can tell that this is a colder feeling, and I've been going for that this entire time by mixing a lot of blues and purples into my final scheme, or even into mix my colors to create shades, is because I want this to feel cold. So if I was to do a warm color scheme like that goblin the first goblin I ever painted, I would be doing a lot more yellows, oranges, browns to create warmth in the model. But since I'm trying to create cold here, I'm going for a bit more of a colder blues, purples, blacks, trying to have high contrast and that sort of thing because I want this to feel cold. And even when I wash this, I'm probably going to be using an oil wash that's black and blue in order to create that tone or feeling of blue, of cold, of frost, that sort of thing. And I'm also going to be mixing my own snow basing and texture paste using baking soda, white ink, and PVA glue, which, for those of you who don't know, is essentially Elmer's glue or wood glue. In order to get some frost in my base, I'm going to be using grass tufts that are like brown or even white to really send home the message that this is a cold model. But until I get to that point, we're going to keep on painting in this wood tone. I'm not sure how long I'm going to go tonight. It's been a long week. I'm currently recovering from a shoulder injury from work. And that takes a lot out of me, especially when I have to, or I'm supposed to be taking it easy, but I'm pretty terrible at that. Just a guy that just, well, growing up, when you got injured, it was just kind of, oh, okay, we're not going to the doctor, so, put an ice pack on it, keep going. So, now as an adult, when I'm supposed to be taking time off or anything like that, or not lifting certain amounts of weight, it's hard for me because I've just been growing with this feeling of no, suck it up, toughen up, keep going. But I'm definitely trying to do better. So I want to be around. I don't want a life later on where I'm in pain just because the weather changes. I don't want to be able to. Well, actually, I already do know this, but that old man that is like, "Oh, rain's coming. I can feel it in my shoulders." Well, already feel it in my knees, but I want it to stop there and not feel so much about the weather patterns in my bones. So. All right. You also see that I have a eclectic mix of painting handles right now, and it's simply because I haven't 3D printed enough painting handles to handle this amount of models. Uh, I've been 3D printing and opening up an Etsy shop, which I had hoped was in time for the holiday season, but we'll see. It's currently December 17th, so if you want one by the holidays, you probably should have ordered it yesterday. All right. We're making some good progress here. Might have to put a little bit more paint on my palette in order to finish these guys. But I'm feeling pretty good about where we're at. Some people might be thinking when they're watching this, like, oh, you resin printed your Killteam models. Well, yeah. And I'll tell you why. I'm cheap. I'm kidding. Not really. But it's a larger answer than that. I like the opportunities that 3D printing in general provide me, and I'm not big on the whole model that GW has right now for the way they sell models, for the way they distribute, for the way they pay their employees. But they're a big company. They have overhead. They have more than just their miniatures and that sort of thing. But I think they haven't embraced resin printing and 3D printing in general as much as they should. They're supposed to be industry leaders. They have control of the biggest part of the Warhammer or wargaming hobby, and they are really having a stranglehold on independent creators that are creating extra bits or anything like that and not allowing their community to continue to grow. And that's not something that sits well with me, and I think that they also should actually move on with the times and actually provide STL packs and that sort of thing for their models, or they're even their own, like, oh, hey, we know we have this new line coming out and you want to convert your old models. Here's some STLs that you can 3D print your own add-ons and accessories in order to get the Killteam that you want, to make sure that if it's the lore you want or the chapter that you want for your Space Marines, anything like that. It's even gone to the point where they've had promo videos that show 3D printed models in their own product videos, not the injection molded stuff they usually have. And it just kind of feels hypocritical. Which is all of that is to say is, yes, I am. Ooh, let's get that out of the camera. I'm cheap, and I'm not going to buy a $70 Space Marine unit that only fills up like a Killteam when I can resin print it for $2 in plastic or resin. I'm not going to say I'm doing something I'm not, because I'm definitely breaking some intellectual property stuff. But these are paid for models, though. These are I believe it's Cults 3D or CG Trader Maker's Cult. You can buy these models. I think it was like $25 for all the STLs you see on the table or desk. So, still not Well, no, it's pretty cheap. Um, it's definitely cheaper than anything you'd find by GW. You can't even buy skulls for that much, I don't think. But enough trying to defend my piracy of an intellectual property. We're gonna keep on painting these guys. I'm not actually sure if these models should even be like wood or if they should just all be like synthetic plastics and stuff. But I mentioned earlier that I want this to be a bit more like a. Well, obviously these are modeled after a mixture of like World War One and World War Two Germany. So I'm gonna kind of honor that by giving it that World War One wood furniture kind of expression from those conflicts. Anybody find it interesting that like Austrians were like kind of responsible for starting both world wars? Wait, was Archduke Ferdinand Austrian? I'm not actually positive on that one. I saw a funny theory earlier today on Reddit that what was like the biggest example of that you can think of that makes you think, oh yeah, that was totally a time traveler affecting that what happened there. And somebody brought up the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand as an example of a grenade was sent into or was thrown at Archduke Ferdinand's car, but bounced and hit the wrong car. And you go, okay, well that seems like a time traveler changing the outcome of something. And then later on, when Archduke Ferdinand's driver took him back down the same street, realized where they were and was like, oh, okay, we're not going to go here anymore. Tried turning around, got stuck. And Archduke Ferdinand was shot by one of the conspirators that just happened to be there. They're like, no, that's definitely seems like a time traveler, which cracked me up, but also, is it weird? I don't know. You find some funny things on the internet. All right. So I think that is all the wood furniture on these guys. I think I'm going to go back with Leadbelcher by Citadel, which was the additional metallic color for these rifles. Or not Leadbelcher, it was Iron Warriors. Boom. Yeah, right there. I think I need to pick up a different lens. I think that's kind of what's not helping me out right now. Which I could take off the macro lens I have on here right now. Maybe see if that helps. Ooh. Ooh, maybe. Let's put this on top of a glass cleaning cloth. I don't want to damage it. All right. Let's hold this guy up. See if we can get it to focus a bit better. I can't tell if that's any better. But we're going to keep on moving on. Make sure this metallic is nice and mixed. I like the Iron Warriors metallic because it has a purple undertone, which really helps sell that kind of cold metallic. Though purples can be a bit warm, they are a mixture of red and purple. purple, red and blue. But I don't know. I think purples give a kind of cool shadow. So yeah, we're just gonna clean this up a bit. After we do the wash on these guys, we are gonna come back and hit it with a dry brush of lead belcher over all the metallic bits to really make them pop. Yeah, we're just gonna come back here, hit this little attachment point, making sure all the metal bits are actually metal bits. Magazines, barrels, whatever the fuck this is. I keep getting texted. I'm wondering who's texting me right now. But when we go on break, I will take a look. Alright. Just quickly blasting through the cleanup of these guys because I want to move on to the next step if I can. Right here, we're just going to make sure the little Aquila is standing out. Yeah, we're going to hit these. There we go. Really a fan of these models. They're really just so fantastic. They give such a great, like, World War I aesthetic. Love it. Quickly blasting through these. Not quite sure what I'm going to do for this guy yet. As far as colors for the canister and bands. But we're just going to clean up some of the metallics. Cool. Not sure how many viewers we currently have. Let's open up the stream on a second monitor. Cool. Let's go back to monitoring. Alright, hit that Aquila. Moving on. With metallics, more than pretty much any other paint, you really need to make sure your brush is well hydrated, because metallic paints actually have flakes of metal in there. If that gets dried in the bristles of your brush, you're going to have a bad time. So we're just gonna keep on keeping on. Trying to not rush, but kind of work through this fairly quickly, because it can get boring pretty quick. Don't know why I suddenly decided to start talking in a generic Western accent, but here we are. Okay, I didn't even touch that guy. Nor did I touch him. Alright, this mag definitely needed a bit of a touch-up. Interesting thing, I see a lot of people keep referring to magazines as clips. Clips are a wire cage, essentially, or clip over bullet casings, or to keep them together. There are certain guns that fire off of a clip, mostly pellet guns nowadays, but the M1 Grand, that is a clip-fed. Keep doing that, talking, and then take a drink in the middle of my sentence. But M1 Grand is a clip-fed firearm. You push the clip into the gun, and it'll eject the clip when it's done. That's the ping sound you get in most, like, World War II movies. But most guns are magazine fed, which is a external object filled with bullets that you enter into the gun, rack the chamber, or slide, and a bullet will enter the gun. A clip-fed system is typically the bullets getting pushed into the top of the gun or into the gun, into an integrated magazine system, if that makes sense. It's a weird topic, but if you see a rectangular object holding bullets that get slid into the gun and then they rack the slide or something, then it fires, that is a magazine fed weapon, not a clip fed. A little bit of a miffed point on my part, but not really important, but it's just one of those things, you know? It's like the same thing. I'm a welder in the real world. And so many people are like, oh, you did like the stick weld or MIG weld on this. And you're like, no, it's TIG. Not that you would know the difference between those, but damn, it's frustrating. Making sure just making sure we're hitting all the metallic points to make sure that it's clean before we add our wash on. We don't have to make sure it's like super clean, but we want to make sure that all the high points have the paint that we want before we put the wash on. That will help us hide any of the seams or the meeting points between paints that aren't so clean, which tends to happen when you're batch painting. The nature of it is trying to move quickly, so sometimes you make mistakes because of it. I'm going to get a little bit of Retributor Armor by Citadel. That's going to be my brass tone. Though I could get... You know what? I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use Brass Scorpion for my brass to differentiate it from the gold I have for my Sergeant. You might hear the bottle getting mixed off to the side. I'm holding as far from the mic as I can, but it's going to get picked up anyways. I think my next kill team I'm going to tackle is going to be some Tau in the both the Compendium and the Chalnoth, I don't know how to say it, themes, because I like both. I like the models for both. I think both are viable in the meta, so to speak, though I don't really play that often. You know what? I'm going to hit these Aquilas with a little bit of the bronze. I think that'll look good. And I am 100% correct. So. There we go. I'm going to make sure I'm going to hit all those Aquilas as well. There we go. And what was the other thing? I said the gun butt. Gotcha. So on infields and I believe Springfields, there's actually a metal butt plate where the gun meets your shoulder. That's called a butt plate. And they were typically made out of brass or steel. In order to honor that, I'm going to go in for a bit more of a brass, because I want it to be that these guys are a little cheaply tired. These are mass-produced weapons, so I want them to feel like it, which means that there's going to be features that are identical in each of the things. They're going to be low cost, because if you're mass producing something, you want to reduce the cost of the manufacturing process. And brass, for some reason, it is usually used for things like butt plates and stuff, where you don't want to add steel because it's going to add more weight, but you want something durable and that won't rust. Brass is a good way to do that. And if they do get damaged from the butt of the gun, like resting in the dirt when you're taking a piss or anything like that, you want it to be able to withhold that abuse and not wear super quickly. So a little bit more realism to my grim dark boys. I'm also going to do some brass on this guy. And in that vein, I want the chainsword to not be super special. I want it to be just a kind of simple, kind of mass-produced, nothing, not... They're not going to be as well funded as Space Marines. Let's put it that way. So, got the teeth of that guy and the Aquila on both sides. I think that's all I'm going to hit for this guy. I'm not going to... Oh, maybe I should do the Aquilas on their helmets, too. Might add a bit of visual interest. Yep. I'm doing that. I'm going to go grab all the guys I just did and hit their Aquilas. I'm saying that a lot right now. Aquila. It's kind of a fun word. I'm not going to lie. I think I've gotten less viewers every stream I've put out, which seems interesting to me, but also kind of makes sense. Alright, I did a little bit of a mess up here, so we're going to rinse my brush. A little bit more Iron Warriors and just tap that visor to clean up the mess I just made. Seems like my video is pretty dark. Alright, more brass. This. Hit the Aquila. You know what? Thinking I'm just going to do brass for the little canister as well. I want these guys to hold up to a visual inspection, so I'm kind of making sure I'm getting most of the angles you can see as to the best of my ability. Some of these things are a little too hard to reach, so we're not going to worry about them too much. Again, the wash is really going to help us out in hiding some of the details that we've missed. That's typically why I try to do a little bit darker of a primer, just so I can hide things that I'm not good enough to do, or are impossible to reach. So let's get some more brass on my brush after I hydrated it, because again, you do not want the metallic paint, or any paint for that matter, drying on your brush. Alright, I'm also going to get some of the details on this guy's backpack. I think he's my communications officer. I'm going to make sure I hit this stuff with a little bit of the bronze to add some visual interest on the backpack as we go. Got some vents on the side. We're going to go ahead and do those bronze. Alright, let's make sure we hit the Aquila. I feel like I'm on the verge of my voice cracking. Alrighty. Again, we're just going to hit all the little brass details. Like, we're batch painting. We're going to be hitting the same things over and over on each of these models. We're going to get faster and faster as we do. I can tell you that the longest part of this was base coating all of the wraps on their legs here and their gas mask, because I had to be careful about hitting the metal and the coat on all these models. All right. Okay, that guy's done. Move on. So now we're getting to the point like this guy. This gun, I mentioned earlier that it was also metallic, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do a like painted gun to make it the same kind of gray that I made the outside casing of the chainsword, or if I wanted to do another metallic. I'm thinking, because this guy's a veteran, he's a experienced veteran guardsman, something like that. He might have picked up a little bit more interesting gear along the way. And I think maybe because for the actual stats on this model, he is actually supposed to have one of their rifles. But I really wanted to make it to where his prosthetic hand was a focal point, so I just gave him a fist, mechanic fist, and this little bolt pistol. So I'm going to paint it like he found it, and it kind of works to the same effect of his last gun. But I'm going to go ahead and do it a bronze, because that just seems cool. It might seem like I'm putting the paint on fairly thickly, but metallics have an issue I've noticed where they don't have a ton of coverage. This isn't necessarily true for things like the Vallejo True Color, or from what I can tell, the Pro Acryl metallic range, though I haven't tried either. But I've just noticed that metallics tend to have a hard time with coverage. So I messed up a little bit, did a little bit of overspill of paint. Just going to clean it up real quick and move on. Oop. Got a little bit of the brass on my brush. Now my paint cup has metallic paint in it. Cool. Alright, we're just going to keep on going. Aquila. I really like saying that word. Aquila. Cool. I also like putting metallics over a gloss coat because it gives them a more metallic sheen. It's a little bit glossier, has a little bit more reflectiveness, especially if you don't have great coverage like I was just talking about. Alright, Aquila. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and do the flash hider, this bronze as well. So, fun fact about like copper and bronze, they're fantastic heat sinks. They have some of the best thermal conductivity besides like aluminum. Now, aluminum is a lot cheaper, so that's why it's typically used as a heat sink, not because it's the best one. In fact, you think gold is the only thing that's a better conductor. I'm not sure about thermal conductivity. But it would make sense to have a flash hider that's meant for heat consumption to be made out of a bronze, or no, not bronze, brass, in order to get some of those heat distributing properties so your gun doesn't overheat. Looks like we had briefly 2 viewers. All right. Making sure I got everything on. Oh. Yep. Definitely doing bronze on this heat sink here, especially after my whole spiel about this, the thermal properties of copper and bronze. Get that, Aquila. All right. let's create some visual interest. Do that little band holding the two together. A little bit of color. Color. Little bit of color. All right. Okay. I'll leave that rifle alone for the most part. Yeah, I am still centered. So if you keep seeing me look at the camera to make sure I'm centered, it's because on the stream I have the window blown up. Not enough that I should be having issues with graininess because of lack of resolution. It should be actually, the camera should be running at a higher resolution than my stream is. It's because I blow it up in order for you guys to have as big of a view as you do of what I'm doing. And sometimes it gets a little off kilter and I'm not actually centered to the viewfinder of the camera or the grid of the camera. So I'm just double checking it's where it's supposed to be. Right, that being said, just about done with the brass on these guys, or bronze in this instance. That's it. There seems to be a pretty consistent spike. All right. Got one last dude. My bruiser, who happens to be using a shovel. Because it's funny to me. I think if I had been able to, I would have found a frying pan as my bruiser option. Because that would have cracked me up even more. Which, I am a good enough digital kit basher for these files that I could have found a frying pan and added it to his hand. But I wasn't going to take the time to do that because these models are already so nice. That I was running out of time. I had a bunch of commissions that were taking my attention, and I was also trying to design some of the products for my Etsy page, which I will try to add to the description of this video. Because, yeah, I sell little dice containers. The Pocket Tail. It holds like 2 sets of dice or a set of dice in your miniature. Has a phone stand in the center of it that doesn't take up any extra space. Yeah, I think it's cool. It was something that I kept seeing the people that were just starting out. They usually put their character sheets on their phone, but they only had like 1 or 2 sets of dice, or they just wanted something that was quick and portable for the 4th or 8th game that they're a part of. You know who you are. COVID was a great time for having multiple D&D games a week. I will say that about it. Oh, right. We're at the point where I'm running out of little details to do. So it's time to look at this guy. Ooh. I think I was forgetting to do gun butts. Never mind. It was not time to move on. We're going to go back and pick out all the plates on the gun butts for all these guys. So busy talking. All right. Some people have asked me why I use such a big brush, and it's because using a small brush is no different than using a big brush with a tip that stays sharp. They do the exact same thing. The only thing that they do differently is one of them holds paint for longer and stays wet longer, so I don't have to rehydrate it so often. Which, because you haven't figured it out, It's the bigger brush. I like using the bigger brush because it gives me more working time with the paint before I have to rehydrate it. If you have a nice brush or even cheaper synthetic brushes that can stay sharp at the tip, and basically that stays sharp right there, use a larger brush. You're going to have a way better time with things. I really, truly think that people would have a more enjoyable painting experience if they simply used a bigger brush. But that's me. You might find that your mileage varies significantly from what I think is the way to go. Alright, we've just about gone back over all the gun butts to make sure that they're bronze. Good lord, I can't speak tonight. It's currently 9:30 where I am, and I typically am in bed around 10. Because I work and get up for work at like 5 in the morning most days of the week. So such a good beer. Alright, I'm going to pick that guy back up. After realizing I didn't do the gun butt on this guy either. No, I did. Why does that not look like he's painted? Okay. Let's look at this guy. I can add blood and such to the bayonet. I'll do that later. After I do all the basing and everything, so I can put fresh dropped blood. Jody Stevenson, VASF.tech. I don't know what that means, but welcome to the chat. What am I going to do next? I'm thinking. Think I'm going to go ahead and do just a simple darker gray on the bases. I think I'm just going to go ahead and fill those in. Do I go lighter or darker? Let's go darker. I'm going to use a little bit of... Nope, not going to use that. Yeah, I'm going to throw a little bit of Eshin Gray mixed with some... Let's go with a blue contrast paint. And black. A dot of black ink. Something dark. I'm going to be dry brushing it into lighter tones, but because it's a snow base, I don't want it to have a lot of color to it. I typically in my bases like to add greens or browns or something to make it look a little bit more earthy. I'm going for snow, and I don't know if you've noticed, but ground that's cold and like a tundra or anything, it looks really dark. Yeah, let's take a little bit of ultramarine contrast paint added to Eshin Gray, and a dot of black ink. Let's see if we like that. This is also going to help improve the flow a little bit, which is going to help us a lot. Let's grab a fairly large brush to help us base this pretty quick. Where did all my large brushes go? My wife steal them? She does that. Yeah, it's definitely adding to the flow. It's getting the color I want. Excellent. Let's go ahead and mix this. It's getting that bluish, really dark gray kind of tone. That was exactly what I was looking for. It's about what we're looking for. Looks black on the screen. I don't know why. But we're going to go ahead and just start painting that. And because the contrast paint is in there, I'm getting really good flow down into all the nooks and crannies. I am going to be adding my contrast paint, or not my contrast paint, my wash over all of this. So I don't need to worry about getting the cracks too much, but making sure you get stuff in the nooks and crannies is always better than not. Because washes, they only do so much. Excellent. This is exactly what I was looking for. Very happy with that little mixture there, which is again ash and gray with a single drop of black ink with a little bit of ultramarine blue contrast paint. It gave me the consistency and color that I wanted. Now, I touched on this on a previous stream. I pre-thin a lot of my paints when I switch them from the Citadel pots to dropper bottles. I pre-thin them with a flow improver and all that just so I have the consistency I want. So when I say I add contrast paint and such to get the consistency I want, I'm changing it from like a pre-thinned or very well-flowed paint and that's ready to go right on a model instead of adding water to it. It changes it from that to more like a wash or a milky consistency. All right, that's 2 bases down. 14 to go. I'm using a bit more of a stippling motion on this because it is a pebbled textured base. So I'm trying to make sure I get into all the little areas by using a circular stippling motion. This ensures I still have fairly good control, and the paint gets everywhere I need it to. I think stippling and dry brushing are severely underrated techniques in the mini painting world. Well, stippling not so much. I think dry brushing is kind of underrated. Everyone kind of just uses it for basing and call it good. I think it's a needed skill for a lot of weathering and making sure that you create like fabric textures on things. For instance, when I go back over all the coats on these guys, I'm going to be using mostly a dry brushing technique because I want it to look like thread. I want these to look like wool coats, kind of pea coats, if you will. Not like red leather. I want this to look like winter gear, not necessarily a Milan fashion show. Don't know why I use that as an example, but here we are. All right. I'm currently on my 5th model for basing. I have roughly 10 or 11 to go. I might have to mix up more paint for this, as it's using a bit more than I anticipated. Making sure we get most of the spots. Again, because I had it primed gray initially, I can leave some stuff unpainted, and it will actually just help it look like a mixture of rocks and textures. It's not something I'm necessarily looking for, but it could definitely help me. It could actually make the paint job more interesting. But I tend to focus all the interesting bits and any like weird kind of color mixtures or all the highlights. I want to put the most attention around the face. This one's using a lot of paint, but it's my sergeant, so it's okay. Now, you might be noticing that I've left some parts of the guns and such unpainted, and I'm going to continue to leave it that way even before I wash it. I'm going to wash it with a bunch of certain details unpainted because I don't want them to be affected by the wash. Because, for instance, this is a plasma pistol. I'm going to make sure that doesn't get affected by the wash, even if I hit the entire surrounding area. Because after the wash, I'm going to go in and create a glow effect, which is going to be a white followed by a kind of turquoise and a blue, working up the tones to make sure it looks like it's glowing. And then I'm also going to hit the surrounding area of the model in order to make sure that the glow effect looks like it's actually exiting the coils and actually affecting the light from for the rest of the hand and gun. I'm still curious of what Jody meant with that comment, but keep on keeping on. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to mix up more of this base. Usually when I'm at the tail end of a painting session, I'll make sure that I'm remembering all the different paints I use. Oop, I made a little oopsie on his boot there. I keep notes of how I painted everything. I include mixtures and what I think the ratios for those mixtures were, where I put what color, that sort of thing, so that when I come back and I need to paint more for this particular unit, or I have somebody else once like, oh, hey, how did you do that? How do I put this into the words? I want to make sure. Ooh, I think I just moved my camera. I want there to be a history there. I want there to be a recording of what I did, so if I come back to it, I share it with anyone, anything like that. I want it to be readily available, that I don't have to try to remember, because my memory isn't that good. Ooh. Like, whose memory is that good? Like, 5 years down the line, I might want to do a little bit more work. I want to add another model to this. I want to do X, Y, and Z to it. The only way I'm really going to be able to do that is if I have all my recipes and what I did and how I did it written down. So the reason I'm saying all of this is that I'm putting a responsibility on myself to make sure I remember and to write down how I mixed the base color and any other thing I've done. Like, I'll even write down, okay, bronze, brass scorpion, bronze, or, well, actually brass scorpion, to the Aquilas and the gun butts and some of the flash hiders and that sort of thing. And obviously mixed with this stream and even looking at these models, I'll be able to tell other things that I might have missed, but it's always better to write things down. Nobody's perfect. I'm certainly not. All right. Seems like I got that ratio correct again. So we're going to keep on painting these guys. I've done snow basing before for one of my own personal characters, and I thought it came out really well, and so I wanted to do it on a kind of larger scale, and that's when I saw these Valor Corps models that are a representation of the Deathcore Krieg. I thought they were the perfect models because of their jackets, their whole look, the fact that Germany gets a little snowy, and it just seems like a good kind of. So the lore of like the Death Krieg is that like their entire planet is toxic. That's why they wear the gas masks. It'd be interesting if like, well, it might be a new thing, and that their planet just has a nuclear winter going on. And so they wear the gas masks because of the fallout, and they're in the middle of a winter because it's a nuclear winter. Didn't get their climate change under control. I'm not too worried if I kind of stipple some onto the coats themselves because, you know, it kind of sells it as like a mud or something like that. It's kind of sticking. Obviously, I don't want it to be like a ton like I just did, but if you kind of get it like that, you get this kind of nice little tie-in that's actually tying the model to the base. And so something I'm doing right now is I'm kind of stippling it on, then taking my thumb and I'm wiping it off. So it just kind of gets this dirty kind of gradient towards the bottom, which you actually can see in the camera right now. And I'm not going to do it on all the guys. I'm going to create a little visual interest on some. On these boots, I'm probably going to go a little bit heavier, try to get them to look like they were just walking in it. So there we go. Tips and tricks with Kieran from Tales from the Basement. Which is exactly what I want this channel to be about. Is helping everyone tell better stories at the table and have better immersion at the table through painted minis. I'm not of the belief that you need to have painted models in order to have a good game. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it definitely enriches it. And you can even go as far as do like printed heroes or tabletop heroes and that sort of thing, which are paper miniatures that you just print out. There's multiple Patreons and that sort of thing. I even encourage you to do those if you're not ready to move into miniatures or you just don't have space. They're a fantastic option, especially since you can just buy a few plastic stands that you slide the paper miniatures into in order to for storage, and then you just throw them on the little stands as you need them, and you only need to buy like 10-15 stands, and those take up the most amount of room. Now you may have noticed that some of the tans and such on this model have a little bit of green to them, which was completely purposeful. I actually mixed greens into my tan colors and a lot of my browns in order to create a nice contrast between the red of the coat and the model, because when you're painting miniatures, you want to make sure that you're painting with contrasting or complementary colors, which are colors on the opposite side of the color wheel. For red, the opposite of the color wheel is green because it's a mixture of blue and yellow. You look at it, red, blue, yellow. Well, that's going to make green by mixing those two together. And then yellow, well, the opposite of that is purple because it's red and blue. And then if you go, well, the opposite of blue, well, that's going to be green. Nope. Orange. It's going to be orange because it's a conflicting color. I almost forgot my primaries and secondaries there. And then you can even go as far as do like tertiaries and stuff. I think that if you just have a little bit of a hint of your complementary color in another part of your model, that's going to create enough of what you need in order to have a fantastic looking paint job. You don't have to have the purest version of secondary and tertiary and primary colors in order to have good contrast. It's just a good thing to keep in mind. Just a long way of talking about. That's why I added green to some of the leathers and stuff on this model. And again, I'm not worried about 100% coverage on this base because I'm going to be adding snow. I'm going to be adding grass. If I miss anything, well, that seems like a great place to put some of the toppers on the model, to put some of the grass, some of the snow, that sort of thing, to hide my sins, so to speak. Which always sounds so dirty. I'm hiding my sins. Like, to be honest, the majority of this base is actually going to be covered up by snow. But you want a good, base. You want a good base to build on the base. So you want to make sure that you have good coverage. You want to make sure that as you're building up, you don't really miss anything because it's going to create a better hull. No matter how good of a painter you are, for instance, a zenithal priming, the black to gray to white in varying stages of angle for your priming step, that definitely carries over into your overall paint scheme as you go. Whether or not at the end you can see any of your zenithal prime, it's going to affect how your paint interacts, because paint, even if it's like super opaque, is affected by its base tones. And so your priming is actually a fairly important step in what the final product is going to look like. Is it the most important? No, not really. But it's pretty important. But I think that can be said for most steps of miniature painting. Is it important? No, it's not the most important, but it's definitely up there. Trying to stretch this paint out a little bit in order to get all my bases done without having to mix more, because I'm pretty close, but I'm also pretty close to running out of paint. You might notice I don't need to do multiple coats of this because I'm putting it on fairly thickly, mainly because I don't want to have to come back and do multiple thin layers on a base. That just seems like a waste of time. It's not something that is worth doing. Am I gonna do it? Am I gonna make it? Do I have to mix more? You might notice I'm also not caring if I get it onto the rim of the base. That's simply because I black rim all my bases anyways, because if you don't, I don't consider your model finished. No matter how good the model on it looks, if you don't have a black rimmed base, you didn't do it right. Always black rim your bases, people. Or whatever color. Rim your bases. I don't care if it's gray, yellow, orange, whatever. Just rim your bases. Don't rim your friends. Or do. That's your business. My brain goes weird places while I'm painting, apparently. Alright. I think with my last guy, I mixed just enough of the second base. Now, before I wash, I do have one or two things left to do. I still need to go over a few things on different weapons. I have this cloak to do, and I'm going to do what I would want to say is going to be a darker snow camo. And what I mean by that is I'm actually going to use the same basic material I have, basing tone, and I'm going to base coat that entire coat with the same color. Like so. I'm going to go ahead and base coat the entire thing. I'm going to switch to my other brush because I don't feel like I have enough control to do this. Now, I'm going to say that most of the minis on these are ready for wash. So I'm going to switch over to the handle, switch the minis I'm going to be working on to the handles for my own sanity. I 3D printed these handles. You can find them on Thingiverse. I think I have them linked in the description below. And if not, I'll make sure to include it before I actually post it to YouTube. Damn, that beer's good. Alright, I'm going to go back to my Winsor Newton. Grab this tone. I might actually have to mix a little bit more up. It's okay. These things happen. I'm going to put a little bit of the Eshin Gray on the side because I need it for the next step of this paint job as well. So I'm going to just mix in a little bit, get hydrated basically, and then come back. Make sure if there's any like little rocks on the cloak or whatever. So again, well, for this particular cloak, I'm not actually that concerned about getting a super clean blend, which is a little weird. It's a cloak. You typically, on like cloths and cloaks and stuff, you want like a super crispy blend, but I'm not. And that's because I'm going for a camo effect, which means I'm going to be feathering in a lot of different colors as I go. So this has, and I also want it to look like a kind of rough cloth. It's supposed to be a sniper. He's supposed to be blending in. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be making sure that I have a rough texture. I want that because I want it to look inconsistent. I want it to look like a part of the environment. So, reaching in here, making sure that I base coat the entire cloak, including into this little recessed area. Boom. That cloak is base coated. We're going to continue on this guy. We're making sure, so the reason I'm using the base coat still, by base coat, I mean, to make sure I'm still using the same color I used on the base is, well, obviously this camo cloak was designed for the environment the dude is currently in. So it's going to start with the darkest tone being the ground that he's standing on. And then as we work up the feathered camo effect, we're going to be working it lighter and lighter until we get a snow. Most people are like, oh, you're going to do pure white. No. I'm actually going to do just not pure white. I'm going to do a white, a really, really, really light blue. And essentially what it's going to be is I'm going to be adding just a tiny bit of blue to white. Because again, we're trying to sell that it's cold. And if you want something to look like it's cold, you want to add cooler colors, which is blue. It's not really a warm blue. And if you disagree, feel free to share with me a blue tone that you think is warm. I mean, I literally just thought it might be navy blue. That could be considered warm. But I don't think it's like warm enough to really say yeah. Alright, almost done base coating the cloak. Okay, we're going to go back to to this guy real quick, making sure that we get the insides of the cloak. And I'm still going to be washing this with the wash. Obviously, washing it with a wash. We're making sure that we're getting good coverage. Making sure that we get inside. Because nothing's worse than going, nice, I finished it, and then looking in the inside of the cloak and just going, oh no. Okay. I'm going to call that cloak good. Switch back to this guy. And we're just going to go with some pure Ashen Gray. We're just going to start little random ass little spots. No repeating pattern. We're just adding a little bit of brighter tone. You're barely going to be able to tell the difference here. But as we build up the colors, it's really going to start to make a difference. We're adding confusing, inconsistent little patches over the entirety of the cloak because we're going for a camo pattern. Camo patterns are supposed to break up your shape. And what better way to do that is with inconsistencies that only appear in nature. So, everywhere on this cloak, we're going to be doing little patches, including the inside. So we're not actually going to be working up the full brightness of the camos everywhere on the cloak. We're going to be focusing like the pure whites on the top because we're actually adding shadows and highlights to the camo we're adding to this. That's really important to know because a lot of people when they do camo, they want everything to have the same kind of feathering techniques. They want everything to be super, not consistent, but oh, okay, I'm going to put the same little patches of color everywhere. I don't care if it's white, I don't care if it's brown, I don't care. But they add the same tones everywhere. It drives me up the wall because that's not how you paint the same color fabric. You keep it dark in some areas. So, we added the Ashen Gray to this. So, now we're going to take some Dawnstone, which coincidentally is going to be the highlight color for the base. But not all the bases are dry yet, so we're not actually going to be doing that dry brushing stage until after we apply the wash. Okay, so now I've got 50-50 Dawnstone and Ashen Gray, and I'm just going to come back and hit this all over the cloak. Making some bigger patches here and there, making sure that maybe we get little specks here and there. We're trying to go for inconsistent, kind of organic kind of feel. I'm trying very hard to be inconsistent. I hate being super inconsistent because my brain just does not work that way. But we're adding all these little inconsistencies, and we're going to be layering this as we go. We're going to be going over areas we've already done, and if you don't like it at the end, change it. It's the beauty of mini painting. You are not stuck with what you've already done. Do you want to redo everything? No. I definitely don't. But it might be the way that things got to go. Another thing is that as it dries, it's actually not going to be so bright. So we got to keep that in mind as we go. So, boom. Boom. Just creating some visual interest. We're making sure that we're not just going over all the little patches we did earlier. We're trying to build up. We're also not trying to cover up all the base coating we did. We want this to be all the different colors we've let on. So I'm going to be missing a lot of the stuff I've already done. You know, I think I kind of like the bigger spots I'm doing on this cloak, so I might go back to the other one and add more of these larger patches of discoloration. Making sure that we're going to catch the inside of the cloak. Excellent. I kind of hit some of the spots I already have to make sure that we're getting some opacity. As it dries, as it is going over a rather dark area, let's just boop. Excellent. So it's already starting to look pretty good here. I'm already starting to feel pretty happy with the technique I'm doing. I'm going to make sure some of these are just a little different. Okay, I think it's time to go some pure Dawnstone. And that's, again, we're going to be kind of going over some of the areas we already have, trying mostly to miss them. But if we overlap, that's fine. That's how camo looks in the real world. So don't worry about it too much. Just don't go for full coverage. Keep it random. You don't want too big of areas of this color. Making sure to re-up your brush so you don't have to go over it for total opacity. Seems like my music stopped. When did that happen? Again, making sure we get to the insides of the cloaks. I'm going to go ahead and restart the music because, good lord, it's driving me crazy. Ooh. Alrighty. Is that actually... Did my headphones die? Hello? Bluetooth is not connecting. Okay, there's my music. Alright, so. I think that cloak is starting to look pretty cool here. I'm liking how inconsistent it is, how I'm still keeping some of those dark undertones. I'm probably going to be working on this cloak for a while. Because it's a pretty slow build up. I don't want it to just be like 4 colors here, 8 colors here. Well, I want it to be I want it to be lighter than this at the end. I don't want it to stay so dark. But I don't want it to feel so dark, I think is what I'm going for. I think I'm going for something that feels more at home in snow than rocks. So it might be that I move up to adding a little bit of white ink or adding white paint, that sort of thing, as I go. Here we go, Mario. Okay, adding a little bit of the Dawnstone to the inside of the cloak. Excuse me. Excellent. I think at this point, I'm just going to add a little bit of white. Oh, I just threw my white paint. It's not, yeah. There you are. Alright, I'm using some white scar. So rather thick paint. I think I'm gonna add just a little bit of light blue, just a tiny bit, little tiny bit. Let's add that to a little bit of the Dawnstone. It's gonna darken up a little bit, but if we add a little bit of the whites, yeah, kind of what I'm going for. I might have to make a little bit more. Since it's a camo, you don't have to worry too much about it being such a crazy jump in like contrast or anything, because that's going to help break up your shape. It's going to help you a little bit. So now we're just going to be adding some random bits of this super light gray. Not worrying too much about consistency. In fact, that's not what we want. We don't want consistency. We want it to be this really inconsistent pattern, because our brains and the brains of most hunters are trained to recognize things, or biologically trained to look for patterns in things. It's why you're predators. That's or even for the instance of humans, it's also the hunter-gatherer technique. If you look for certain patterns, you're going to survive better because, oh yeah, that pattern means danger, or that pattern means food. That pattern means that an animal is weak. So it's important that when you're creating a pattern for camo, it's super inconsistent in order for it to actually sell as a camo pattern. I think I'm doing a rather good job of selling it, if I do say so myself. Again, make sure you get some inside the cloak. Pretty happy with that. Smooth out so it doesn't look quite so much like paint. White is notoriously hard to get good coverage over dark colors, especially in acrylics. Very happy with how this is turning out so far. Alright, I need to mix up just a little bit more of the white and Dawnstone. Or whites. Ooh, that was way too much blue. It's okay, I can scoop it out with my brush. Scoop. Some good scoop. Let's see if that is too much. Too much. Okay. It also doesn't have to be a perfect match to the other model. So you can also see that I'm not painting over the darkest tone. I'm covering up a lot of the, or not a lot, but I'm making sure that there's overlapping of each of the colors before, and I'm also making sure that each of the colors before are being represented in the final product, because that's how you get a good camo. Not all the colors on here, or all the colors on here need to be represented because it's a representation of the environment that you're in. And the more you include the features and looks of what was found before, the better your camo is going to blend in. I'm thinking I did a little bit too big of blobs on some of these, or they're a little too linear or consistent in like shape. I'm going to come back, I'm going to hit these and make sure that they're a little more unique. Like, for instance, these are both kind of C's, so I'm going to make sure it kind of comes down and around. A little bit of a white here. Now, I know some people are be like, oh, it's impractical that he's wearing red under that. Yeah, it is. But it's cool. It's down here. I'm going to be adding a bit more because I think this is the highest highlight I want in this kind of area or inside the cloak. So I'm going to be adding a little bit more than I would because I'm going to be adding higher highlights around the shoulders and face. But I want it to look like it's the same tone. Okay. I'm thinking I'm just going to keep adding white to this. Excuse me. Add a little bit more white. I want it to be an almost white at the end. Yeah, that's an almost white. So we're just gonna go to the guy that's had some time to dry and apply some of these. I'm moving into a little bit more of a stippling because white is so hard to get good coverage on. Alright, we're just hanging out, painting some camo up to an almost completely pure white. Just a little bit of Dawnstone and Dragon Blue from Reaper added to the mix. Just making sure we get some smooth coverage on here, and then we're going to call that guy's cloak done. We are going to be adding a wash to this. So a lot of these highest tones are going to be washed out, but that's fine. If we feel like it's been washed out too much or we want to add highlights, we're going to come back in. We're going to hit all the little patches with little mixtures of color that should be about the same. And that's when we're going to really encourage the highlights in certain areas that we weren't able to do before. You know, let's kind of wrap this guy up in here, kind of just may not be able to see what I'm doing. Just got the zone. All right. So you kind of see that I went a little bit different on both these guys, but that's fine. We don't want consistency. Thinking some of these colors are a little too blobby, so I'm going to be kind of bringing them down into, again, kind of inconsistent, interesting shapes. Alright, that seems a little bit better. Now is the time. I double check. Ooh. If I'm missing any base colors of anything. And I'm gonna say, I don't think so. I think, ooh, I don't think so. Immediately find something. I'll give it a ash and gray, mix it back into the base tone to try to get a similar color, and base this guy. I'm gonna do my old faithful and probably leave you guys after I finish washing these guys. It is 10:30 currently p.m. and I'm starting to feel a bit tired. So I'm gonna use the same brush I was just using to base coat. Put this guy aside to give him time to dry while I apply a little bit of a Gnome Oil Wash. And I think if I can find one of the little cups to mix in. Nah. I'm just gonna grab some Gnome Oil. Ooh, I do have some older Gnome Oil. Gloss. I don't want gloss. Aha. Or was I gonna mix up some oil wash? Decisions. I'm gonna mix up an oil wash. But because I don't have all the tools immediately available to me to get that done, I'm gonna go ahead and call it a night. Thanks to the, I think, 2 of you that actually joined me for the night. Thanks. And I'm Kieran from Tales in the Basement. I'll see you next time.